key part of our lineup for today is the fact that Gani Adams and others have rejected the Southwest Sharia panel. Like I said during the introduction, there has been growing conversations as to introduce Sharia courts, and that will also mean that the Sharia law will find more or will find expression in the west of Nigeria. Now when we're talking west, we're talking Lagos, we're talking Ogun, we're talking Osun, we're talking Oyo, all of the states on that axis, Ekiti. So now a Yoruba self-determination group, Yoruba One Voice, led by Are Onana Kafo of Yorubaland, Iba Gani Adams, has kicked against the push to introduce Sharia law in parts of the southwest, warning that such a move could destabilize the region and threaten Nigeria's already fragile pluralism. And that's a major concern. Now, he had sent out a communique issued at the end of the international virtual conference with the theme Sharia law in Yorubaland, setting things straight through restructuring. Now it's a major problem. You want to go back to the beginning and ask, why exactly is the Sharia law pushed? Why is there an agenda to push the Sharia law conversation to the west, to some parts of the west? Now we know that in some parts of the north, places like Sokoto State, the Sharia law is run side by side with the laws of the federal government of Nigeria, run side by side. There are Sharia courts that handle issues and all of that. But what is this move about, regularizing it as part of a system in the west of Nigeria? And if we don't have the likes of Gani Adams speaking out loud, about the issue, how much of it will actually exacerbate into something else? But you even want to look into this. In having this conversation, you want to look into the details of the Sharia law. What are the pros and the cons of having Sharia law? Why, would another geopolitical zone consider, to make this widely accepted in the country? Remember that the federal government of Nigeria even still has issues it's because sometimes you go to solve a case in the parts of the northeast that function side by side with the Sharia courts, and you have issues because if you cannot hold them down in the courts of the land, a clause in the Sharia law definitely makes them punishable. How would we handle this? And does the judiciary have a place in regulating that this does not become a fight that tears down this country?
Well, let's look at the key emphasis, the key component of the Sharia law. Mm-hmm. Is first and foremost about the religion called Islam, right? And then it's a code that is supposed to be made for Islams and the practice of the religion, or the believers in the religion. Now, it covers, you could call it a moral compass, that covers...
So for moral codes.
Yeah, that moral codes or sets of codes within the Islam religion that covers motive, lifestyle, covers, conversations, relationships, issues of morality, issues of family values, issues of business, and all of that, which are also things that are captured in the Bible. The way of life, how you should relate with your fellow man, and what you should do, how you should do them. Now, of course, that is all traced down to the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and of course the teachings and practices that he represented. Now, bringing that to Nigeria, bringing that to a religiously multifaceted society, and trying to push that down to every region or any other region that is not Muslim, it's a breach of the fundamental right of every Nigerian. Remember when that conversation kick-started, I had said it's about time for us to stop trying to shove down other people's throat whatever religious belief that we have. The diversity of Nigeria is what forms the beauty, and that beauty can only be sustained when we all learn to respect each other's belief each other's standpoint, each other's perspective, each other's religious practices, other cultural practice and perceptions. Now, when we fail to do that, and we each believe that, oh, my religion, my culture, my language is superior to you, and so should be imposed on you, we are going to continue having the conflicts that we have. Let's, for instance, at this point say, okay, the Sharia, which a lot more people have said is very harsh based on the religious tenets of Islam. If we were to have a Christian court, Oyai, and the Christian man who has stolen, for instance, goes to court or chooses to go to the Christian court instead of the Nigerian criminal court where he's going to be tried, and then the constitutional stipulated punishment given, he goes to a Christian court instead and says, oh, I am a Christian. Yes, I'm a Nigerian, but I'm a Christian and I don't want to be tried in the setting, the different courts in the Nigerian constitution. Okay, so you now go to the Christian court, and at the end of the day, the Christian judge sits like Jesus Christ and said, go ye down, your sins are forgiven, sin no more. Well, the Nigerian society also approves of, or appreciates that kind of gesture, because that is what is being pounded by, the Sharia court. That is what is being championed by the conversation in the Sharia court. We've seen young men and young women whose hands have been cut when they say, oh, this was as a result of punishment in the Sharia court. Now, whether those conversations are true or not, those who have lived up north have spoken about, the extremes of the Sharia court. And one of the basic questions that every right-thinking person in Nigeria would ask now is, why do we have a Sharia court when we have customary court? We have federal high courts, we have, the appeal courts, and we have the Supreme Courts. These are all courts at the different levels of the society that should handle every case. And as far as the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is concerned, we should not have any other thing attached to it in terms of interpreting the law. Because whoever sits in the Sharia court is not interpreting the law according to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Is interpreting the law based on the moral code of Islam. So if we want to push the conversation for Sharia court to go into every region where the Muslims are, then it's about time for us to talk about and establish Christian courts, and maybe even atheist courts or African traditional believers court. So we have every religious practice, you have your court. So if you don't want to go to the Nigerian Constitution court, you now have to go to your religious court to be tried.
But you see that the main thing that is being affected here is the goal for peaceful coexistence in the country, and that continues to be a very serious issue. If we all keep putting our religion and political divide on the table, we'll continue to strain the bond that ties us together as a country. Now we're seeing that regional autonomy and restructuring remain the only viable paths to ensuring peaceful coexistence, and sustainable development in Nigeria. When we continue to push for these kinds of things, then we're just looking for how to heat up the polity of our nation. Now we see that there are strenuous calls for the political class to continue pushing. Nigeria needs to get to the point that true federalism is something that we are practicing in Nigeria. And one of the things that he spoke to was the fact that as these things continue to change, now there are fresh what will I call it, agitation on the table is, if we do not handle these issues, eventually the Yoruba nation would have no other choice than to push for a complete political independence. This is something that Gani Adams has said that will become the end result of these kinds of pursuit. If we keep trying to talk about it and establish an easy way out, we don't want this in the West. Because, Francis has said he has talked about all of the pros and cons in this. We don't want it. And he said if you keep pushing, it will mean that we change what our posture is to ask for, a complete political independence. Remember that hasn't even gotten us anywhere. Our brothers in the East are having that conversation. It hasn't gotten us anywhere. So why do we? Because today it is the West.
Tomorrow
it will be the East. It will be the South. So where does true federalism stand in fighting these kinds of things? Well, Ghanaians and other, political stalwarts in the West have condemned efforts to implement Sharia law in Yoruba territory, describing them as a ploy to weaponize religion for political purposes. He's saying, religion once again wants to be weaponized, just to score political points. And one thing that we must all acknowledge is that if this comes to birth, we are giving more chance to embolden extremist tendencies.
Exactly.
It's the extremist tendencies that is a major problem in the consideration of this conversation. And I would always say, where do our traditional rulers lie? How would the traditional rulers of the North sit and allow that this becomes a conversation? The allowance of Oyo, all of the monarchical system in the West and that of the North must sit together in a room and let's process this. How did this become a pursuit for the West of Nigeria?
Well, I think I've shared it once on this side that one of the biggest shock, in Christendom, for instance, we talk about the divide between Pentecostals and the Orthodox Church. Yeah. Now, before I traveled to the North and had to spend some time in the North, I had the perception that when you talk about Islam, it's Islam. Every Muslim is a Muslim. There was no segregation of whatever sort. There was no disparity until I traveled to the North. And I discovered that the Northern Muslims have this segregating tendency. They have this stereotyping tendency towards the Western Muslims. Now, one of the shock I had was when I heard a Northern Muslim say, the Yoruba Muslims are not like us. So you are a Muslim, but just because you're a Yoruba, you are not like the Northern Muslim. That alone paints the picture of, what we believe, or perhaps
the way we practice
is not the way they practice. And that will bring to mind a lot of things. If this is how you perceive this region, why are you now trying to bring yours to this region? Because as far as religion is concerned, it is individual salvation. Whether it's Christianity,
that asks for freedom.
Exactly. Whether it's Christianity or Islam, at the end of the day, I'm going to meet the Holy Prophet on my own terms. With the Holy Prophet, you are going to meet Jesus Christ on your own personal relationship. So it's a personal thing. Okay? So even the different religious practices, there is no pastor that will hold you and go to heaven. When it is time for judgment, we are all going to stand individually across the spiritual divides that we belong to, or the spiritual affiliations that we have. So trying to now force your own is like me. Okay, I'm a Catholic, for instance, and I love to kneel down in prayers. And then in my personal prayers, so I'm coming to see somebody who loves to just sit, fold her hands, and pray to his or her father. And I'm saying, no, you must kneel down. Because I love to kneel down. You must kneel down. These are forcing our own personal belief and trying to shove it down the other person's throat, which clearly doesn't work. And these kinds of conversation would only help to further thicken the world of divide, the world of fighting, the world of aggression, the world of violence, which will not do anyone good in Nigeria.
Well, like we've already said, there are several parties that must be a part of this conversation. Traditional rulers are important. Our politicians are important. The lawmakers in this country must look at this process, without any form of bias. Because, even our lawmakers are dented by their various religions, Christian, Muslim, traditional worshippers and all of that. We have to think of what is best in the interest of the nation Nigeria, not any individual religion, as it were.